Good evening, everyone. Afternoon, I guess I can say, for 4 p.m. Welcome to the Gilbert Town Council study session. We have a few items on our agenda to get through today. We'll start with calling this meeting to order, and item number 1, presentation and discussion on park and ride relocation study. Hi, Nathan. I get to see you in person.
Good evening, Mayor Peterson.
How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me. It's been a while. Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Nathan Williams. I'm a transportation planner with the town, and I'm here to talk about the park and ride relocation study. We've been working on this for about 18 months with our colleagues at Valley Metro and their consultant, HDR Engineering, and we're in our wrap-up stages of the study. Our consultant will be doing the main presentation, but I just want to give a brief intro. That's why I'm here. But we're wrapping up the study, and we're here tonight to kind of present that, provide some updates to you on that, and answer any questions or any concerns you might have. So one other point we wanted to make was after this, we'll have an IGA, hopefully anticipating coming back to you in December for design and construction. With that, I'll introduce Matthew Totten of HDR Engineering. He can give the main presentation on this.
Thanks, Nathan. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you for this opportunity to talk about the Gilbert Park and Ride relocation study. Here's an outline of the discussion this afternoon. I'm going to start with some brief introductory remarks. We'll talk about the market analysis, the site evaluation, as well as the preferred site recommendation, and then we'll wrap up with the community outreach and next steps. So why did we do this study? The town of Gilbert is anticipating redevelopment of the existing park and ride that's in downtown Gilbert. As you're all aware, there's been rapid development in the Heritage District, and there are multiple CIP projects that are underway in the area, most notably the Ash Street realignment, which is going to bisect through the middle of the existing park and ride. So really the goal of this project is to identify and evaluate potential sites for a new park and ride facility in Gilbert. And this was a joint effort between the town of Gilbert and Valley Metro. So this map on the screen, this shows some of those Heritage District projects. The one in particular that I mentioned is the Ash Street realignment, which you can see there cuts directly through the east half of the park and ride site, which is shaded in pink. So a little background information on the park and ride itself. It opened in 2005. It's served by the Route 531, which is the Mesa Gilbert Express. Has 250 spaces, approximately 10% parking utilization today, and there's about 9 average daily boardings for the Route 531 at this location. So as I mentioned, if that park and ride were to close, we would have to relocate the terminus for the Route 531. And so the proposed solution for that is to relocate it to the Sam's Club just a few miles north on Gilbert Road. The rest of the Route 531 would remain the same. So now I'm going to talk about the market analysis. Really the purpose of this was to identify where existing work trips are originating from in Gilbert and are headed to downtown Phoenix. So we also wanted to consider this in the context of the existing ridership for the Route 531. And there's a tool that we use to do this, and it's called LEHD, and this stands for Longitudinal Employer Household Dynamics. And basically what this is the work trip data that you get from the US Census Bureau. And so we pulled 2022 data for this. We also supplemented it with survey data from the Route 531 that was part of the Valley Metro Origin and Destination Study from 2023. So this map, this shows the results of that analysis. And what you want to see here is that the areas that have the darkest shading in blue, those are the concentrations of the most work trips from Gilbert to downtown Phoenix. And you can see that the existing park and ride in downtown Gilbert is actually in one of those areas, but there are several others within the town, most notably southeast of the Loop 202. Next, I'm going to talk about the site evaluation and the overall site evaluation process we followed. We began with a site identification process. Then we took 8 potential sites through a level 1 evaluation, then 4 sites advanced through a level 2 evaluation, and then finally resulted in a preferred site recommendation, which I'll talk about in more detail. So a little background on the general site identification. We did do a town-wide search We looked at all vacant parcels within the town that were a minimum of 2 acres in size and had close proximity to an arterial or freeway. And that resulted in 41 potential parcels within the town of Gilbert. Now 29 of those were vacant parcels with private ownership. 8 were vacant parcels with public ownership, primarily the town of Gilbert. And then 4 parcels had shared use opportunity. And then based on a collaborative review between the town of Gilbert and Valley Metro, 8 parcels were advanced into that level 1 evaluation. So this is a list of those those 8 sites that we took into the level 1 evaluation. And then there's a map on the right which shows their location. And we'll come to this map, back to this map a few times throughout the presentation. But first I want to talk about the evaluation criteria we used to screen those sites. So we began with the level 1 evaluation was a high level, kind of more qualitative analysis, whereas the level 2 evaluation was more detailed and quantitative based. So now I'm going to refer back to that LHD map I showed earlier, and the purpose of this is to show those 8 sites overlaid with that LEHD data. So if you look on the map, each of those numbers represents a potential park and ride location, and you can see for the most part, they overlay directly with the areas of the highest concentration of work trips from Gilbert to downtown Phoenix. Now, based on the results of the level 1 evaluation, 4 sites were advanced into the level 2 evaluation. And those sites are Site 1, which is the existing park and ride in downtown Gilbert, but reconfigured. Site 3, which is at Freestone Park. Site 4, which is adjacent to Crossroads Park. And Site 6 is at Cooley Station. Now, all 4 of these sites are currently owned by the town of Gilbert. So here's a snapshot of the evaluation criteria we used for the level 2 analysis. And as I mentioned earlier, this criteria is much more detailed and quantitative based. So here's a snapshot or just kind of an overview of each of the 4 sites. This is an aerial of the existing park and ride in downtown Gilbert. You can see it has kind of a diagonal orientation along the Union Pacific Railroad. The eastern half of the existing park and ride, that's the portion that would be impacted by the Ash Street realignment, but it would be possible to potentially modify the western half of the site to remain a park and ride. The next site is Site 3 at Freestone Park. So this park and ride is located adjacent to the fire station, basically between the fire station and the Freestone Recreation Center. And this shows a potential conceptual layout, and the primary access would be off of Freestone Parkway. Site 4, this is adjacent to Crossroads Park. This is an interesting site because it's bisected by the Union Pacific Railroad. There's also a retaining wall along Santan Village Parkway, so that's why the access point to the conceptual layout that's shown is at the far north end of the parcel. And then finally, this is Site 6, which is at Cooley Station. This is an area currently under mixed-use development and has seen rapid growth in recent years. And this is, the roadway network will be basically completed in the next couple of years. You see it's adjacent to Somerton Boulevard, but that will eventually connect with Verde Drive. So based on the results of the level 2 analysis, Site 6 at Cooley Station is recommended as the preferred site. And there's a couple reasons for this. So one is that it does have the best site access and the most flexibility in terms of the potential for a site layout. It also has the strongest integration between land use and transportation, and it has good existing and future ridership. There's over 6,000 residential units that either in existence or underway as part of the Cooley Station area. It also has the ability to integrate with existing express bus service and also a connection to the ASU Polytechnic campus. So one thing to note is the Cooley Station Park and Ride site would be served by a different bus route than the existing Park and Ride, which is served by the 531. This Park and Ride would be served by an extension of the Route 542. This is an express bus that currently serves the Chandler Park and Ride, and the idea is that it would be extended 9 miles from the existing Chandler Park and Ride to the Cooley Station Park and Ride. We did put together some initial cost and ridership information at a high level. The capital costs we're presenting as a range, basically a minimum and a maximum option. The minimal option is approximately $3.7 million. This would be a real limited area for parking, approximately 50 or so parking stalls and just basic infrastructure. We then have an expanded site option, which includes more enhancements, would be in the range of about $5.1 million. This includes an expanded parking area around 100 spaces, includes CCTV, and then shade canopy for about half the spaces. We also calculated the operating cost for that extension of the Route 542, and it would be about $166,000 on an annual basis. And it's anticipated that all costs would be funded through regional resources, likely Proposition 479, pending what happens here in 2 weeks. We also conducted a ridership analysis for the Cooley Station Park and Ride, and it showed that there would be about 31 average daily boardings based off this initial service plan, and that's about 4 times the amount of the existing park and ride today. So finally, I want to wrap up with community outreach. Valley Metro did distribute flyers in the project area and canvass the area, including 23 businesses and 4 apartment complexes. Overall, the general sentiment was extremely positive, and there were no formal questions or comments that have been received to date. So lastly, the next step for the project would be that intergovernmental agreement that Nathan mentioned. This would be necessary in order for Valley Metro and Town of Gilbert to move forward with design of the park and ride. So pending approval of a future IGA by the Town Council and the Valley Metro Board, design for this new Gilbert Park and Ride would begin sometime in early 2020 or in 2025. And that concludes the presentation. And with that, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Any questions at this time? Councilmember Bongiovanni?
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, so the construction of this is paid for by who?
So as I understand it, right now there is $2 million that's allocated to the Park and Ride project through PTF funding, basically regional funding. Then there's also some local funding that's available, Town of Gilbert has for basically a bus stop improvement. And those 2 fund sources could be pooled together. There's approximately a little over $5 million available in funding.
And the 166 a year, how's that funded?
That would most likely be funded on a regional basis. It's a little bit of a gray area now because of the uncertainty related to Proposition 479. Should that pass in 2 weeks, basically all express bus services in the region would be funded at the regional level and not by the jurisdictions themselves.
So right now we're at 9 riders a day average. You're hoping to get to 31. Are there plans to do more than 31? Because right now at 31, I see it costing $636 per person per year.
Yeah, so express bus ridership is largely a function of the service provided. Most of the available data for this analysis was conducted in 2023, and we have seen a steady improvement in the express bus ridership over the past year or so. What's different now is that pre-COVID, express bus ridership was much more consistent, kind of day by day. Now we see huge spikes. So for example, the middle of the week has much higher performance than, let's say, Mondays or Fridays. So that sometimes drops the overall average. That's why you're seeing that kind of lower average on a boardings per trip basis.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kaprowski?
In the budget figure that you provided for the parking lot that had more amenities, would that include amenities such as a restroom?
It could, Councilmember, but that is yet to be determined. Basically, the process from here would be final design would start, and during that, there would be a facility needs assessment that would dictate what amenities Gilbert and infrastructure Gilbert would like to see as part of that development. So no decision's been made in terms of restrooms. It certainly could if that's desired.
Do express bus services, do they have onboard Wi-Fi?
Some do, yes. It just depends on the type of fleet that's used. But yeah, the general industry trend is to provide Wi-Fi and also USB charging.
And would that be potentially funded by regional funds, or does that require the local support?
So all of the bus fleet, express bus fleet in this region is funded at the regional level, so that would not be a Town of Gilbert expense per se, that is pooled among the region.
Thank you.
Councilmember Tilke.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to make sure I understood, because I may have missed at the beginning, that the express bus that we currently have downtown will continue. We're looking at moving that to Sam's Club. So we're not taking away what I would consider North Gilbert express bus opportunity. This would be adding a Southern express bus, which then I think would add to those numbers, because right now they don't have that opportunity unless they want to come all the way downtown. Is that correct?
Councilmember, yes, that's correct. Yes, so the existing 531 would remain. It's just that the terminus would be at Sam's Club instead of the Park and Ride in the Heritage District.
All right, thanks so much.
I think Greg was one of those riders from downtown, wasn't he? Yes. Thank you for that question, Councilmember Tilke, because it does clarify. There are probably a few that live in South Gilbert that might be using the 531 from the downtown Park and Ride at this point that might not want to move to Sam's Club. It's a little bit further for them still to go. Any other questions? Did you want to add anything, Jason?
I do. Excuse me.
Thank you.
Mayor, Council, I just wanted to clarify one point, that currently there is no plan to utilize local funds for the design and construction of this project. The plan is to use regional funds that is allocated to us through Prop 400 for both design and construction.
Prop 479.
These funds are Prop 400.
Well, the old Prop 400.
Correct.
Not future funds potentially coming out of Prop 479. Sorry,
Correct.
thank you. Any other questions for Jason? Anything for Nathan? Thanks for coming out this evening. Thank you for the presentation. Appreciate it. Next on our agenda this evening, presentation and discussion on legislation related to House Bill 2297, adaptive reuse. Ava Kutro headed to the podium.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Ava Kutro, Planning Manager, and I'll be presenting this House bill for Veronica Gonzalez, Principal Planner. In April, House Bill 2297 was one of the bills aimed at the housing shortage. August 7th, this went before the Planning Commission for the citizen review and initiation. And by January 1st, we must comply with House Bill 2297, and it pertains to standards for multifamily residential development and adaptive reuse. Some of the requirements of this House bill include that you are allowed to have multifamily development or adaptive reuse on up to 10% of the town's existing commercial, office, or mixed-use buildings. You can have that today, but you need to go through a hearing process and review. Under the House bill, you could have that by right without a hearing, but not just on any office, commercial, or mixed-use building. The building must be in disrepair or have a 50% vacancy in the leasable square footage. The parcels must be at least an acre in size, but not more than 20 acres. And what's there today can remain. So the parking that's there today can remain. The height, even if it exceeds the height for what the new use is, can remain. The setbacks, they can remain as well, even if they don't meet the current standards. If you're adapting to multifamily development and converting an office, mixed use, or commercial building, there are additional requirements. One is that the height for the structure that the multifamily is going in can go to the highest allowable multifamily zoning height within a mile of the site. A maximum height of 5 stories, unless you're in 100 feet of single-family zoning, then 2 stories. And just for reference, our highest multifamily zoning right now is multifamily high, and that can go up to 55 feet in height. And although they call this an adaptive reuse bill, you are allowed, if you're converting to multifamily, to completely demolish the building. So while you can adapt it, you can also completely demolish and rebuild. And if you go to all multifamily, at least 10% of the units have to remain low or moderate income for 20 years. This is a map of the town, and the dots represent the existing commercial, office, and mixed-use buildings. Of all of these dots, according to the House bills, we allow up to 10% for adaptive reuse, so approximately 85 buildings. Again, they would have to be in disrepair or 50% vacant. While we have to allow 10% for adaptive reuse, the bill also allows the municipality to designate 10% that are excluded from these provisions. So for instance, in the Heritage District or Rivulon or our medical communities, we can designate, again, 10%, so up to 85 of those buildings to exclude out and not make eligible for adaptive reuse. They would still be eligible. They would just go through the process with the public hearings and the reviews. It would not be by right. And the municipality can choose these areas, designate them, but once it's done, they remain for 10 years before you can relook at it and change those areas. We call this bill the bill of the 10%. It was confusing because they use 10% in 3 different ways. It doesn't add up to 30%. There are 3 distinct 10% measurements. The first is multifamily development or adaptive reuse is allowed on up to 10% of existing commercial, office, or mixed-use buildings. 854 buildings in the town, 85 can be adapted if they're on at least an acre, not more than 20 acres, 50% vacant, or in disrepair. The next 10% is that the municipality may exclude 10% from the provisions of this House bill. So again, 854 buildings, 85 can be excluded. Once we exclude them, 10 years, we can't change the buildings that we've chose to exclude. Lastly, if the adaptive reuse is used and it converts to multifamily, 10% of all the units have to be low income or moderate income and remain that way for 20 years. Next step is to go to the Planning Commission on November 6th, where they'll make a recommendation to the Town Council, and then December 3rd, this will come back to you for the final hearing, and this must be done by January 1st. So that concludes the first presentation on adaptive reuse. If there are any questions, and then after this, I'll have 2 more presentations for you on other House bills and Senate bills.
Thank you, Ava. Councilmember Kaprowski.
Hi, Ava. Do you already have the areas or list of the buildings that we're going to request not be eligible?
We're considering them now. We first had to run all the numbers to see what 10% would be, and we're working with economic development. We've spoken with legal to come up with those. That's why I brought up some scenarios. Heritage District, for instance, has 10 buildings in it. Rivulon Community, that has closer to about 50 buildings. But then we're wondering, is it better to do our medical offices? So we're still looking at those. The main map that we were looking at is this. This is from our general plan, and these were our employment hubs. So these are the areas we'll probably be looking at. We have right now calculations for each of these areas and how many buildings are in each. But if we were to look at all of them, it was 502 buildings. So we have to narrow that down to 85. So we are working on that. I wish we did have that for you tonight, but like I said, we're working with economic development and other areas of the town to come up with that.
And will that be available prior to our December meeting?
Yes, I'm hoping to have it available for the commission in November.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Anderson.
Ava, is there a specific definition either in the statute or in our code of what disrepair means?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, thank you for asking that. Actually, both of these questions we discussed this morning in legal. There is not. We looked at the international building codes. That had a definition, very strict, that it had to be unsanitary, vermin infested, things like that. We also are looking at other towns' codes right now and reaching out to other municipalities to see what definition they may use. We do realize that we need one.
Thank you.
Councilmember Buckley.
I have a question. I recall having this discussion with you guys prior on some of these. These rules that you have just gone over, are these the rules coming down from, you know, from the SB, whatever that was, HB 2720? Yeah, are they coming down from that, or are these rules that we as the town, as, you know, planning and economic development are putting together to be cohesive with what they're asking us?
Mayor, Councilmember Buckley, these are direct from the House bill. For some reason, it switched to my next presentation, but they're direct from House bill, and the league actually put together model municipal ordinances. So most municipalities will have almost the exact same ordinance with the exact language from the House bill.
Okay, for some reason, and I may be thinking of a different, you know, project or bill, I thought that we would have some input on, is that the other one?
That's a different one.
Okay, okay.
Although, Mayor, Councilmember Buckley, in the previous presentation, is there a way to bring that back? We do have that one ability where we can choose the 10% to exclude. That's probably the only designation that we can do. The rest is all in the House bill that we'll adopt.
Okay,
I think
okay.
she's probably referring to, and I can't remember which bill number it was, but the one that you have all of next year to put what Gilbert's going to do in place before it goes into effect January 1st of 2026.
Yes, that's our middle housing bill. That came before you about 2 months ago. Ashley McDonald brought that, where we established our central business district, and then that's the only one that we have until next year to write up.
Okay, okay.
The three you'll hear tonight are all this January. They must go into effect.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that this is all coming from up above.
Come from God.
Yeah,
Yes, the town, on this particular House bill, we have not, staff has not added any additional restrictions.
okay. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Bongiovanni.
Thank you, Mayor. Any estimation of how many of these 850 buildings could be considered in disrepair or under 50%?
We, unfortunately, Councilmember Bongiovanni,
Okay.
we do not.
What would be, let's say I own a storage shed that I can presto make it disrepairable. What's the advantage of me doing this? So would I make money making it an apartment complex? It's a trick question.
Yes, I'm not in that field. In just casual discussions that we've had, we don't know that this will be widely used in the town because it is very expensive if you are going to keep the commercial building to adapt it for residential, all the additional bathrooms. It's just not set up that way. However, as I mentioned in here, on multifamily, you can demolish it and rebuild. So we're not quite sure what the advantage is and financially, but we have to move quickly on this. This
Yeah,
was the bill that we found out about the latest in the series. This one was proposed right at the very end, so we don't have the background on this one that we do on
Because you can get
the other
pretty
ones
hokey
I'll
with this. You
present.
can come up with some ideas here that could make things happen. Is there a timeline on how long this building has to be in disrepair?
There is not. There is just that verbiage about 50%. That building has to be in disrepair or have 50% vacancy in the leasable square footage. And again, there is no definition in the bill for disrepair.
Okay. Thank you, unfortunately. Thank you.
Councilmember Tilke?
Thank you, Mayor. Ava, one of the concerns I have with this and some of the other bills is that it was passed in an effort to have some affordable housing available throughout the state. I've not seen anywhere where there's any accountability for that 10% being low income, and I am making the assumption that will not be placed on the backs of municipalities. So I'm hoping, and maybe this is more towards Rob and the league, that we're going to be looking at that next year. I don't know if there'll be technical corrections. I don't need a comment. I'm just making a statement, Rob, but that the state is going to be following up and ensuring that these are going to be low income, modern income for 20 years.
And Mayor, Councilmember Tilke, this bill is one of the few that actually does have the 10% requirement, and they do define what is considered low income, what is considered moderate income. So I do believe that this will provide affordable housing. I'm not sure who will be tracking it. I'm assuming the state.
I think the devil's in the details on that one. It may start out that way, but if somebody's not tracking it, it won't stay that way. So I'm just putting it out there to the universe at the moment. Thank you.
That's a great point. I think one of the things that we'll find is that the municipality is going to need to track that, and it's going to be difficult to be able to do, I would think. Councilmember Buckley.
One more question. So to follow up with something Kathy said, Councilmember Tilke said, is there going to be a price level? I mean, what is, because low income is different to a different group of people. Anybody, to me, low income is one thing, but maybe to someone else, it's something different.
And Mayor, Councilmember Buckley, I'm just looking, they do have the definitions in here. I could read them if you'd like. Low income is for a person or persons whose household income does not exceed 80% of the area median income. And moderate income is for a person or persons whose household income does not exceed 120% of the area median income. And then it goes on further, for which the occupant pays not more than 30% of the gross income for the occupant's rent or mortgage, and that is under both low and moderate income.
So not more than 30% of their income, their gross income?
Goes to rent or mortgage, and for low, you can't exceed 80% of the area's median income, and for moderate, you cannot exceed 120% of the area median income.
The area median income. Gilbert's median income is $108,000. Is that about right now?
34, was it?
So when you look at the median income for the town of Gilbert, what that would still be.
Yeah.
Sorry, Councilmember Buckley, did you have something else?
Yeah.
Just hit me what she said.
No, thank you for those comments.
Mayor and Council, just one quick response to that. It's the regional median income, so it wouldn't just be the town of Gilbert.
Okay.
I believe it's by the county, Maricopa County.
Thank you,
Okay.
which is much lower than Gilbert's.
Thank you. It just says area, so we weren't quite sure. Thank you, Rob.
Clear as mud, of course, Ava. Yes, the area, not just, yes, which we would assume our area would be Gilbert, right? As we're trying to define this. Councilmember Bongiovanni.
Thank you, Mayor. If you said this, I apologize. Would this require a zoning change, or is it automatic? If I went from a storage shed to all of a sudden I want to sell my property and sell it to someone who wants to build a multifamily, would the zoning, does there have to be a zoning change, and is it automatic, or do we vote on it?
There is no hearing, no process. It's by right. Councilmember Bongiovanni, I'm assuming we would update our zoning maps to reflect it, but there's no zoning hearing. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
No, you are, unfortunately, yeah.
She doesn't want to have to come right out and say, no, there's no local process. That's the answer. Councilmember Torgerson.
I'll just say it. The geniuses at the state stuck us again, correct?
You don't have to answer that. Any other comments or questions for Ava on this current discussion, 2297? Then we'll move into the next one, Ava, which will be presentation and discussion on legislation related to House Bill 2720.
Okay. Thank you. You'll have me here for the next two. This one is the accessory dwelling unit bill, House Bill 2720. This was brought to you actually the day it was signed. I had been prepared to bring you the town's changes, and then we switched quickly to what is in the bill. So it may sound a little familiar to you. As you may be aware, guest homes, accessory dwelling units, secondary dwellings are very popular in the town of Gilbert. House Bill 2720 focuses on these accessory dwelling units to aid in the statewide housing shortage. Currently, the Gilbert Land Development Code allows these accessory dwelling units on our single-family zones from our 6,000 FS6 to an acre and above lots. One guest home and one incidental dwelling unit are currently allowed in the town of Gilbert. Under the House bill, it's similar, except they don't distinguish between a guest house and an incidental dwelling unit. They're all called accessory dwelling units. 2 are allowed, 1 detached and 1 attached on all single-family lots. Plus, if you're over an acre, you can have a 3rd accessory dwelling unit if you restrict it to affordable. Under the current town code, we again had the 2 categories. Guest homes could not be rented. Secondary dwellings could be rented. Guest homes couldn't have kitchens. Secondary dwellings could. We will now be combining those all into the title accessory dwelling units. The House bill allows the applicant to decide whether or not they want a kitchen. Both are allowed. And it prohibits the town from, the town cannot prohibit the use or advertisement of either unit for renting long-term. So we used to prohibit guest homes from being rented, allowed ADUs. Now both can be rented long-term, and they can have a kitchen or cannot. It's up to the applicant. Currently, our code states that these units have to be incidental to the primary, subordinate to the primary, and that they have to be located within the building envelope. This is the largest change to the town ordinance. The House bill still says that they have to be subordinate to the main, and they have to be, the main has to have greater square footage, but it's the location that is the largest change. Currently, these have to be within the building envelope of the main house. Under House Bill 2720, they still have to meet the front setback of the main house, but the side and rear yards, we can only regulate a 5-foot setback. So in some areas on our larger lots, these accessory dwelling units currently are required to have a 10, 20-foot setback from the side and rear. Under House Bill 2720, they would now be allowed at a 5-foot setback. Currently, we state that these accessory dwelling units have to be compatible with the design, materials, et cetera, of the main home, and that an on-site parking space must be provided for the ADU. Under the House bill, we can't do either of those. It specifically states that we cannot require that the accessory dwelling unit match the exterior design, roof pitch, finish, and that we cannot require additional parking on site for the accessory dwelling unit. So the parking, that will also be a large change from our existing code, the parking and the 5-foot setbacks. Our accessory dwelling units right now require an administrative use permit Basically, that just lets the neighbors know what's going on and what it looks like and where it will be located. Under House Bill 2720, they are permitted use. So while we can do a cursory site plan review, we cannot require use permits. And the part of the bill that has us moving quickly is that if a municipality fails to adopt development regulations before January 1st, accessory dwelling units shall be allowed on all lots or parcels zoned for residential use in the municipality without limits. So we don't want that. So we are proposing, just quick summary, incidental dwelling unit will now be changed to accessory dwelling unit in the code. We will allow 2 per single family lot, 1 attached, 1 detached, a third if your lot is over an acre and you restrict it to affordable. The size is restricted to 75% of the gross floor area of the primary dwelling unit or 1,000 square feet, whichever is less. The location, again, we have 5 foot for the side and rear, and then the same front setback that is allowed for the main home. You still are bound by the lot coverage. You can't exceed the lot coverage that's required for that zoning district. As I mentioned, the setback's 5 feet. However, currently we require that home step back. So we are keeping that in the code at 5 feet. You can go to 10 feet in height with your accessory dwelling unit. And for each foot above 10 feet, you have to step back 1 foot. And the height cannot exceed the height of the base zoning district. So if your base zoning district, if your primary home is allowed to go to 30 feet, your accessory dwelling unit can also go to 30 feet. While we are not allowed to state that the accessory dwelling unit match the exterior design of the main home, the bill does not prohibit us placing design restrictions on accessory dwelling units. What's shown here are the design standards that are used on all single-family homes in the town of Gilbert currently, and we are going to place those on accessory dwelling units as well. We're allowing built-in cooking facilities. They can rent these separate and apart from the main. They cannot build on utility easements. They have to use the refuse services of the main home. Elevations we want articulated. We don't want a Connex box out there with a door on it. Elevations facing public view, we want architectural treatment on. Entryways being well lit. These are just standard design that are currently used, and they were adopted by the town, I believe, in '96, and they've been in use since then. Next step, November 6th, Planning Commission hearing. December 3rd, it comes back for Town Council hearing, and January 1st is when the regulations all go into effect. So that concludes the presentation on House Bill 2720 on accessory dwelling units, unless there are any questions at this time.
Councilmember Kapowski.
Eva, you mentioned specifically on one slide that long-term rentals cannot be prohibited. Could you speak to the plans surrounding short-term rental?
Mayor, Councilmember Kaprowski, I cannot, we did discuss that in our legal meeting this morning, and we will be looking into that. But currently, it just addresses long-term rental, unless, I don't know, Rob, if you, you know more on short-term. I think you spoke on this last time as well.
Yeah, Mayor, Councilmember Kaprowski, the legislation actually mandates that we do not have any controls over short-term rentals. So in other words, we can't require that they only rent them long-term, which was actually one of our main sticking points as we tried to find a compromise on this bill. Was one of our arguments was, if we're looking at the production of affordable housing, because of a lack of affordable housing, not sure how the provision of short-term rentals addresses that need. but we aren't able to restrict any of that under this legislation.
Thank you. I have one other question. Ava, you mentioned that one of the accessory dwelling units could be attached and one could be detached. We had talked a little bit about what it meant to be attached during a previous issue. What are the definitions surrounding attachment currently and proposed?
Mayor, Councilmember Kaprowski, those were recently adopted. I believe it was probably a little over a year ago. We have standards. Continuous roof line has to look like it's attached. Separation of not more than 10 feet. I'd have to, if you want, I can look up the definition, but those were some of the main standards for that.
But those were adjusted or adopted
They were
since?
adopted,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Buckley?
Okay, I'm going to go back just a little bit to clarify something. So we talk about the building envelope, which I believe, being in real estate, most people utilize their full building envelope for their home. Not everyone does, but, so you talk about the building envelope, but yet people can build their casitas or extra units within 5 feet of the fence next door. So where does that building envelope come in and the 5 feet that goes over? Can you define that a little bit so it's a little bit more clear?
Certainly. Mayor, Councilmember Buckley. Building envelope, when I speak of it in this bill, those are the setbacks for the main home.
Right.
So accessory dwelling units currently met the setbacks for the main home unless certain considerations they're built over an existing garage, but for the most part. With the new bill, they will be allowed outside of that building envelope in the side and rear yard to the 5-foot setback line. They still, for the front yard, have to abide by whatever the setback is for the primary residence.
Okay, so that clarified that because, I kept thinking, we have the building envelope, but we can build within 5 feet of that. So anywhere outside of the building envelope, they can build. What about the setback for the backyard?
Backyard and side yard, they can build outside of the building envelope up to the 5-foot setback. So we have a 5-foot setback in the rear yard on both sides, but whatever the zoning district requires for the front yard, be it 10, 20.
Remains the same.
Correct.
And can they add additional garages? I know you mentioned that, but I don't recall what that ended up being.
Councilmember Buckley, by additional garages, do you mean onto the accessory dwelling unit? Or onto the main home?
Housing either your extra family, you may put your kids and their kids, in one of them, and they have 3 cars, and you only have a 2-car garage and maybe 2 spaces to park.
Right, and Mayor, Councilmember Buckley, that is a concern, the parking, because our on-street parking does get congested. Certainly, they can build as many garages on their property as long as they meet code. An accessory dwelling unit can contain a garage as well. It just still has to meet the 1,000 square foot at the 5-foot setback.
You just have to be able to drive into it in some aspect, right?
Yes, I would. You'd need to be able to back out of it too, which is sometimes trickier.
Right. Okay, well, that's good. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Ava? Thank you, Ava. We'll move on to the next item.
I was going to say, I'm still here.
Right into the next one. So presentation and discussion on legislation related to Senate Bill 1162, protest procedures and timeframes for administrative completeness review and final decision on residential zoning application plus. That is a long title.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Mayor. And as you mentioned, this applies to residential zoning applications. So with the adoption of Senate Bill 1162, we have new timeframes that we must adopt, but only for residential zoning applications. So only our multifamily, our single family, not our commercial, our industrial, anything like that. So the first review is the administrative completeness review. So we receive an application with a fee, and staff reviews it to make sure it's complete, to make sure it has all the requirements so that we can review it. The determination of administrative completeness must be made within 30 days. This should not be a problem. Staff currently does this in under 10 days, and that is our goal. So the first administrative completeness, 30 days, shouldn't be a problem. We then, if it's not complete, have to provide a comprehensive list, send it back to the applicant. We currently do that today. They resubmit, second review, 15 days. Again, shouldn't be a problem, under 10 days currently. And then it continues on like that if a third administrative completeness review is done. Once it's determined that it's a complete application, that's when staff and all staff, fire, police, public works, planning, start their review. This is the tighter time frame because from when it is deemed complete, we then have 180 days until council has to approve or deny the application. You cannot continue the application. It's 180 days from when it's complete to when it's approved or denied. There are some extensions within that 180-day time frame. Staff can grant one 30-day extension, and the applicant can grant unlimited extensions, but 30 days at a time. For the most part, the 180 days shouldn't be a problem. However, there are situations, for instance, if we do a major general plan amendment, we like, because it benefits both the applicant, staff, and our governing bodies, to run applications concurrently. A general plan amendment with a site plan for a residential zone could take longer than 180 days. In that case, we can look at the extensions, or we could separate out the applications, do the general plan amendment separately, and then do the zoning. I don't know that that benefits either party, but the 180 days, not overly restrictive, except on those rare instances where we may want to run things concurrently, or we have a project that requires more than 3 internal reviews. So 180 days, and again, approve or deny within 180 days. When looking at the final decision section in our code, again, the 180 days only applies to residential. So for all other applications, I was just reviewing the language, and it said that a final decision shall be made by the Board of Adjustment, Planning Commission, DRB, or Redevelopment Commission, and oddly, Town Council was omitted. I believe that was an error, so we would like to add you back in as a final decision-making on applications other than the residential zoning. And then we've just added in additional language to make the sentence flow. The other item addressed in here, separate and apart from the timeframes, are the protest procedures. We currently have language in the code that allows, if there's an application, that the surrounding property owners can get together, and if 20% or more file a protest in writing, it would trigger a supermajority vote by the town council. The main change to this language is that it now excludes government-owned property from the 20%. That seems fair. I don't know that we would ever do a protest in writing against an applicant to trigger a supermajority vote. It still allows the neighbors to get together. It's still the 20%. They also added in language that just further explains how the vote changes if a member of the council has a conflict of interest, how it's still a supermajority, but it's a 3/4 votes of the remaining members of the governing body once the conflicted member is excused. So that concludes that presentation. Again, same timeline, November 6th Planning Commission hearing, December 3rd Town Council hearing, and January 1st, again, our deadline for this bill as well. And those are the last three bills that we have a January 1st deadline. We still, as Mayor and Councilmember Buckley spoke to, have the middle housing bill that we have another year for.
Thank you, Ava. Planning Commission's going to be busy on November 3rd, and then, November 6th, and then we'll be busy on December 3rd. Any questions or comments for Ava at this time on this bill? Councilmember Tilke.
Thanks, Mayor. Ava, a couple of just comments, I think. One, when we have a situation where neighbors are very, very upset and it prolongs the process, if I'm hearing you right, it appears the best solution for that would be the applicant asking for extensions instead of us requiring that. Am I reading that right?
I would think so. This is another item we discussed at legal today. We're reaching out to other towns as well, just to say, what would you do? Of course, in this time frame, if you have 180 days to approve or deny, I don't think an applicant would want to move forward on the chance that you may deny because you don't believe that you have sufficiently addressed it with the neighbors. But this is the language that we will be adopting. So we do, staff can do 130-day extension, and the applicant can do numerous extensions, but 30 days each.
Well, I just want to say I appreciate that, because if you got into the strict 180 days, the council would be kind of stuck in a position they don't want to be, especially not getting all the feedback from the community. So if they did that down there, this was a good addition. If we did it, congratulations for doing it here. So I was trying to remember now. I talked so long I forgot what my next one was, so I'll just move on. Thanks.
I think you took the glass half full and I was taking the glass half empty approach, which was the legislature passed this, enforced the 180 days so that the public doesn't have time to be involved in the decision, perhaps. And so you're giving them credit where I was maybe taking it away from them. But I think we could look at it in either way, right? Any other questions or concerns or comments for Ava on this one?
And if not, Mayor, if I may, I should have done it after the ADU presentation. I have Anna Cooper, our planning intern, and Erica Prater in the audience. They helped with a lot of research and reaching out to other towns on the ADU. So, and Anna actually made my PowerPoint so that it was not an embarrassment to me tonight. So I hope you enjoyed it.
It was an excellent PowerPoint presentation, Ava. Thanks for being here. I think I met both of you at Larry's going away party, right? Yeah, thanks for being here and thanks for the help on these bills, especially this ADU. And I know that it's been difficult to get through all of the pieces of each of these bills. It's a little confusing. So I appreciate that. Any other comments or questions at this time? Seeing none, thank you, Ava.
And thank you.
And that takes us to the end of our study session agenda. So we will adjourn. You have a little free time, everybody, till we have Student of the Month at 6. Thank you.